Hello and welcome to another episode of the Strettycast. My name is Dale O'Donnell, your host, and I'm delighted again to be joined by Shaun Connolly. Shaun, since we last spoke, how's everything with you, and what have you been reading about when it comes to Manchester United? Or should I say, what have you been tweeting about when it comes to Threads?
I suppose what I've been tweeting, I've been trying to tweet about Barcelona's financial predicament and the various different ways that they've been putting together to sign players left, right and centre while being nearly $1 billion in debt. So, yeah, just trying to keep up to speed of what's going on.
That's why on this podcast we're jumped it up to kind of two different segments. Myself and Shaun will spend the first segment speaking about matters relating to Manchester United, as we always do. And in the second segment, we have a special guest in Alan Feehely, who joins from Football Espana. He's the editor of that site, which is basically a site on all matters La Liga written in English. Alan's an Irishman living in Spain and covers a number of different clubs. So he's very, very close to the ground when it comes to Barcelona. So we speak about some of the details there, the financial situation that they find themselves in, and of course De Jong. But Shaun, want to speak to you about a few matters. Obviously, on the podcast, we've been kind of dealing heavily with pre-season. But something that's popped up before we started recording tonight is Jesse Lingard has completed his move to Nottingham Forest on a 1-year deal. Now, that deal does not include the option for an additional year, so he'll be a free agent again in 12 months' time and open to another big contract, I'm sure. This contract is a $200,000 per week deal, which is huge for a newly promoted team. I can't imagine that's ever been done before. It's quite a surprise, isn't it? Because prior to his exit, or the expiry of his Manchester United contract, Jesse Lingard and with a lot of help from his brother Louis Scott, were making it very, very clear that they had such a fucking awesome time at West Ham and that they were nearly doing everything to signal that they wanted to go back to London and go back to where he spent half a season on loan and really impressed in their bid to push for a place in the Europa League. But he hasn't gone there. In fact, Shaun, he's rejected a move to the Hammers. He won't be quite blowing bubbles, will he?
And when you've got an individual who was represented basically by part and principle from his brother, who was so very, very clear that he wanted to, kind of shows an awful lot about the character of the man who was willing to turn down the club that took him in and gave him a new lease of life, particularly when David Moyes was coming out today, being very, very vocal in how much he admired Jesse and wanted him to return, and they had made an offer for him to return, only for him to turn his nose up at it, the prospect of a 1-year deal. And essentially, it looks like he's following money. You would imagine the same role as he had when he was on loan there, which was a free role to enjoy his football and to be heavily involved in what West Ham were doing going forward. Two entirely different football clubs. Obviously, historically, Forest are a huge team. And obviously, with Dean Henderson is after going there on loan. But it's kind of bizarre that he would turn his nose up at a side pursuing the prospect of breaking into Europe. And let's be honest about it, had they not have fallen foul to maybe a slight little lack of squad depth at the end of last season, they would and should have pipped us for European football as well. So it's a strange one, and I think it really just typifies his personality.
Just to play kind of maybe the card of what Jesse Lingard is doing here. Obviously, he's going there. The contract really suits him. He's going to get £200,000 a week. He is only there for 12 months. That opens the door to, in another summer, he's going to have the option to speak to any club he wants again. He's going to have the option to get that big sign-on bonus again. His agents are going to be well paid again. You know, it's all very much in his terms. And I wonder, is that why he didn't end up at West Ham? Because they wouldn't have given a deal like that. Not a hope.
If you go across what's been reported, West Ham offered him a 3-year contract, or at least a 3-year contract with the option for an additional year. He was looking in around £180,000, and it's believed West Ham offered somewhere in the region of £150,000 to £160,000 a week over the course of 3 years, guaranteed with an additional year. So it's not like that's small money.
No, it's not. But what I'm saying is, all parties considered would rather get these sign-on fees every year. And if Jesse Lingard get that 1 year deal, which he's done, like I'm looking at this deal with Nottingham Forest, and I think they've had their pants pulled down. Now, that very much depends on whether in 6 to 12 months' time we look back at this and he's kept them up and they've had a really good season. You look at the impact that Christian Eriksen had at Brentford when he went there in January. You know, he's a quality player, and Lingard's a quality player. He's a very good footballer. We shouldn't forget that. For him, I think he could also be looking at this in saying the expectations at Forest are to stay up this season. He can go there and help them do that, but it's also a team in which he can shine in, and that might give him that bit of an extra push in getting into that England team for the World Cup. You know, if he goes to a team like West Ham,
maybe so.
You know, it could be a bit of that too. He could be looking at a 12-month contract and just looking at getting into that England team and then making a decision after that. Look, time will tell. But I'm not sorry to see him go. I think you touched on a very good point about him being toxic. I think it was quite clear last season that he was a very negative influence, and it's not something that Jesse was throughout his time at Manchester United. I think he had bad influences around him that wanted him to make it very clear that he wanted out. And, you know, it beggars belief, Shaun, that United didn't cash in last year. They had the opportunity to do it. And there was this belief that they were going to keep Jesse around in the squad, and he just didn't feature. Maybe that contributed to him being unhappy, but I can never see eye to eye with a player that's going to behave and cause disruption.
No, I agree totally. But I suppose one thing that struck me there is when you said that you believe Forest have had their pants pulled down with this. I remember a podcast that we did back during the January transfer window when Newcastle were heavy on Jesse Lingard. And one of the things we discussed at the time was that we were somewhat pleased that the club weren't just willing to bend over. The club named their price for Jesse Lingard and they were factoring it to Newcastle. This is the valuation that we have in him because he's going to aid you in obviously negating relegation to the Championship. So his worth to you is going to be X amount. And Forest may well be looking at that because that's what new bargaining in that player to come in, bolster the squad, get goal contributions and be able to help the side avoid relegation. So that's naturally going to be Forest's number one priority in terms of getting promoted to the league.
You picked Jesse Lingard to do that?
I know it's very easy to say that based on, I suppose, the overall lore around Jesse Lingard, but all you have to do is just rewind back to his time at West Ham. And in that situation when he's not at a mega club like Manchester United, where expectation isn't quite as high and he's given the freedom to play football, he's well able to play football. He's a very, very talented attacking footballer, and when he's just free and he's allowed to, he's proven that his goal contributions speak for themselves.
We'll see. We'll definitely see. I think it'll be an interesting one this season because I think it'll be all depend on really whether he gets into that England team. I think that's why he's going to Forest in the first place. But the move itself made me laugh because of all the shenanigans that went on with all the references to West Ham and blowing bubbles and how fucking happy he was there, but he ends up rejecting them. Quite laughable. And also, it's quite telling that as a free agent this summer, that the links prior to this confirmation saw Lingard linked to MLS and even Saudi Arabia. And there was no serious clubs really interested in Lingard, even though he was available on a free. So put that in your pipe, Louis, and smoke it. Erik ten Hag's strictness, Shaun, is another pointer we wanted to discuss because Bruno Fernandes touched on this in an interview with BBC whilst in Melbourne or either Perth, sorry, I'm not too sure. But he touched on it that Ten Hag is very strict on the punctuality of players, being on time for meetings, eating together. There thinks it's an alcohol ban as well. Bruno Fernandes said something that I thought was interesting. He said that this is something that the team has needed for some time. He said there's been too many people maybe going against the rules and getting away with it and no punishments in place. But Ten Hag has a different approach. For instance, we've seen in clips on training that if a team concedes a goal, the team that conceded it must do push-ups, multiple push-ups. And it's a little punishment, but it's getting in that discipline, Shaun. I'm all for it, But it's still very important in this day and age to have the right balance, right?
We often speak about the enigma that is Manchester United, and I suppose a lot of this has been created by the great man who built the football club into what it is today. Ten Hag looks to be the closest had to him in the hot seat. You need that sort of dogged strictness. You need that sort of charisma in a manager who's willing and able to instill rules and to be able to follow through with the ramps if the rules are broken. I mean, Bruno is being very vocal on it. He's pleased and he seems positive with regards to the rules and the structure that's been instilled by the manager. And I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, like, I always say that, like, text is the most easily misinterpreted thing in the world. People can read that players will be dropped if late for training or team meetings without circumstance. But in all honesty, if a footballer is on his way to training and isn't on the motorway, you know, as long as he gives some sort of phone call through and says, look, I'm stuck here, there's nothing I can do, he's not going to be dropped as long as he's got reasoning. Like, a lot's been made about the zero tolerance stance that's coming, but text is easily misinterpreted. It's good to have rules, it's good to have structure, and obviously it falls back on what we said about toxicity in the dressing room. We have alleviated quite a lot of that with some of the players that have left the club, and we've replaced it with a manager who appears to want to have a giant stick and he's not afraid to use it.
I think what's telling too is we've had good results on pre-season, 3 wins from 3.
Yeah.
And even at that, he's still quite bullish. We've seen the hilarious clip that surfaced online after the last game, a 3-1 win over Crystal Palace, and in the final moments, United had the ball back in their half and the ball went to De Gea, who launched the ball forward, gives away possession, and you can hear Ten Hag on the touchline, David, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
It's just excellent. But like, this is kind of, he wants what he wants from the players, he wants carried out for 90 minutes. And why that really impressed me is something that's been a reoccurring theme in conversations with Manchester United fans for several years, going back to Louis van Gaal, even David Moyes, is how Manchester United have been incapable of going 90 minutes with a strong performance, of 90 minutes of demands. And I think with this kind of manager, we might eventually start seeing that in games this season. We might actually start to see United dominate for entire games because he's so demanding that even in pre-season games when a goalkeeper's kicking the ball out of touch, he's losing his mind by roaring at the player. Like, we've had managers in the past that wouldn't have done that in a competitive league game, even if their job was on the line. Ten Hag is doing it in pre-season games.
For sure.
In fairness, the big thing is we've gone from ultra backing a manager who we loved, who came in and often spoke about putting smiles back on faces. Like that was his job as Manchester United manager. But ultimately, it's much more to that. And what I've been really impressed by, and it's early days, results will speak volumes. What I've been really impressed by was every time that Ten Hag has been asked by reporters of, can you compete with City and Liverpool next season? He could shy away from that question and realistically look at his team and say, no, we don't think we could. But he hasn't. What he's telling his players is, I expect to go out to win every game, win every match. And it's just a different aura around the place. I think his strictness on the players is telling, but the aura and the way he's speaking, I think he sounds like a Man United manager. I really do. I think he knows what he wants, and it's really encouraging so far.
But like, you got to remember as well, this is a guy who has known pretty much nothing but success in his career. It's an entirely different mentality coming into the club. You're looking at David Moyes coming in. What did Moyes win? You got Louis van Gaal, obviously massively decorated manager, but coming toward the twilight of what was his very, very successful managerial career. You got Solskjaer there, who, as you said, we loved and we supported, and ultimately did a fantastic job settling a very, very tempestuous ship that was left behind by Mourinho, even though he was very successful in delivering trophies and silverware. The damage he caused behind the scenes was there for all to see. We've got a guy who's coming to the club now who knows nothing but success. He's got a track record in players. He's got a track record in man management. It's almost like little bits and pieces of the best part of all the previous managers amalgamated into one. Like when you looked at Solskjaer was very, very clear. He left the training to his job was man management. Well, Ten Hag loves man management. He also loves going out onto the pitch and being meticulous in his approach. We'll take Solskjaer for another example. People critiqued him because he sat in the stands and he watched on a monitor and he stayed sitting down while other managers ran their arms around the place. Ten Hag is down on the touchline screaming because someone kicks the ball into touch. It seems like it is all of the best parts of the managers all rolled into one. Now, ultimately, look, it's only pre-season, but if we were beaten 4-0 by Liverpool, they'd still be writing about it today. I mean, that Darwin Núñez hit a hat-trick today for Liverpool in pre-season, and it's been glorified across social media by all of these publications. Yet, last week, it was a pre-season friendly. So there's narratives that are constantly going to be portrayed with Manchester United. It's pre-season, the players care, they look happy. There's fluidity in movement, and even though it's pre-season, it looks like there's some bit of structure, and the front three are buying in. And it looks very positive, and it's all as a result of his managerial skill set. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to lead in with a question here for you. Quite a bit of response, and we'd like to thank everybody that takes the time to be able to send in any questions for us. The first question that I have is coming through Twitter from Mr. Keane Franey. Now, Keane is asking, what is the biggest difference you both have seen from United since Ten Hag has come in? Leads on pretty well from what we were talking about.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been the influence on fullbacks and in how drastic that has been, because in recent years, through recruitment and even managerial preference, we've almost kind of ignored the need for modern fullbacks. The need for a fullback to get forward, to send crosses in, to be one of those playmakers. And you look at the likes of City, their fullbacks operate in midfield for most of the game. They don't really operate as fullbacks. Those players are being trained nearly to graduate into different positions later on in their career and develop their game, an all-round game. So I think we're starting to see a bit of that. The likes of Diego Dallo and Malacia and Luke Shaun that have been asked to kind of get further forward, overlap, and it's encouraging. I think, look, it's going to be challenging for some of these players. I think Luke Shaw is one I would single out that has not impressed one bit on tour. I don't think he's given Erik Ten Hag anything to really hold on to. I don't know, will that be damning on him when it comes to the first game of the season against Brighton? But I think at least with Malacia, he has a player that was understanding of his system. And I wouldn't be surprised in the next few pre-season games, the next one against Aston Villa, if we see Malacia start instead of Shaw at left back. For you, Shaun, Keane wanted to know your difference, or your main difference that you've noticed as well.
I suppose the intensity of the side. We've had 3 pre-season games. We've obviously had a lot of goals. But the one standout thing for me is the overall press that I touched upon a minute ago from the front three. It doesn't seem to be aimless pressing, and that pressing that Gary Neville mentioned to many times, where it was just pressing for cameras. There appears to be meaningful pressing from the front three, and obviously it was highlighted in the very first game when Martial pressed down and got the goal from it. So it's an intensity, a fast pace, and a meaningful press. So I hope to see it continue.
Another question in from Twitter from Midfield Mastro. He asks, any updates on the Aaron Wan-Bissaka situation?
Well, from what I have been told about Aaron Wan-Bissaka, the situation is very calm in camp. It sort of ascends between him and Diego Dallo, in that Dallo has impressed more in training and has obviously shown massive signs of improvement. There's still areas that he needs to improve on his game. He's developing quite the relationship on the right wing with Jadon Sancho. As a result, Wan-Bissaka was being given an opportunity in training to be able to, I suppose, prove that he can have a role in moving forward. But at the same time, the club are open and willing to sell him should they receive a suitable offer, which they have not got yet, as best as I know. But Dale, to you, if they were to sell him, do you feel like they could dive in to replace him, or do you feel like there's someone internally there that could make the step in instead of him?
Well, this is to fall back on what I think will happen. Obviously, we're waiting on that Frenkie de Jong deal to go through, or depending on whether it will or not. But I have a sneaky feeling, Shaun, that Erik ten Hag will ask for a right back this summer before deadline
Okay.
day. We got a left back. I was quite surprised at the time that he prioritised a left back over a right back, but he's actually made it clear on tour that he sees the left as being the weakness. Now, I don't think United fans would agree with that from last season, but it's something that he's noticed, and he's got a left back in. So I just wouldn't be surprised if we did, but maybe Dalot can impress in the remaining pre-season games and get benefit of doubt. But I do think there'll be a right back signed. I think if they got money for Wan-Bissaka this summer, I think that would definitely see a right back come in, 100%. I think United have been quite vocal this summer that if they could sell players, that it would make money for further investment in the transfer window. And what you would see if United could start selling a few players is maybe some of the players that we were linked with earlier this summer might start resurfacing again. The likes of Anthony at Ajax, who was demanding a high fee at the beginning of the summer. If United could make some money off some of the players that they currently have, and then as a result afford Anthony, it would not shock me if they did get involved in some other deals. But as for a right back, I think we will sign one. I have a sneaky feeling that Ten Hag will ask for one, but it might depend on, with De Jong, whether United have to agree to pay an extra fee to match those deferred wages on Barcelona's behalf. Another question in from Facebook from Damien Young. Who can make the grade as a U-team graduate this season?
Oh, well, this is my forte, you know that. Obviously, I'd like to see Jimmy Garner get a bit of him in pre-season. Everybody knows what he has achieved last year with Forest and the potential and the skill set that he has. It's a shame he picked up an injury when he did, because I think we would have seen him for at least 30 minutes per game. I think then when you look at the next lot, there's almost a trio. You're looking at Hannibal, you're looking at now Charlie Savage and Zidane. I mean, between the three of them, you would have thought prior to pre-season that Hannibal was the one who was closest to it, obviously given the international experience that he's had. There's an awful lot to be said about players playing in the under-23s as opposed to players playing against men. And with Hannibal, obviously, he's had that international experience and now has got the acclaim of being nominated. I believe he got to the last three in the Young African Player of the Year award, which is a tremendous achievement for him. So you'd imagine Hannibal is the one, despite how the other two boys have been, that's as close to it. As much as I would like to see Zidane and see Charlie get an opportunity, I think they're a little bit away from it, and maybe a loan would probably be better for them. Ethan Laird, I've always thought very highly of him, but it now looks like there's a possibility, Ajax, or even a possibility, and even if we could get that in a year's loan, that would be tremendous for him to go and play first team football in a top European side. But to really dwell on it, who I think is probably there, Jimmy Garner, possibly Hannibal, and I really don't know what's going to happen with Garnacho. I don't know, is it a case that he's too young, or is he going to stick around and be given an opportunity? But I would think that Jimmy Garner and Hannibal are probably the two.
Now we are pleased to be joined by the editor of Football Espana, Alan Feehely. Alan, I brought you on to speak a bit about, obviously, Frenkie de Jong, and that's the big story surrounding Manchester United this summer following the arrival of Erik ten Hag. But before we get to de Jong, some background, and there's quite some bit to get through with Barcelona at the moment, especially in the past, say, 12 months or more. So to discuss their financial situation, because from the outside, it's a complete shambles. Do you believe this, what we are seeing currently, literally selling all their future revenue and whatnot, and stadium rights, or named the stadium rights, do you think this shows that Barcelona pushed so heavily against UEFA when it came to the Europa Super League? They didn't want to let that soar down. I think this shows that they're so reliant on that, and they're doing this in order to survive until a Super League does come into existence.
I think it's not just Barcelona, though. I think it's all of European football, basically. To keep pace with Premier League and the state clubs is so difficult for traditional powers, talking Milan, Internazionale, Juventus, Barcelona, Real Madrid, laterally Atletico Madrid. There's just no money there, and the financial system for the rest of European football outside the Premier League is so dire at the moment that they're having to do these things to remain competitive in the short term. And also in Spain, the way it works is that presidents are elected. So presidents are elected based on promises they make, and like in a democracy, they have to fulfill those promises. So Joan Laporta's whole thing was like, I want to come back, rescue Barcelona, and return Bartomeu era Barcelona, which is down in doldrums, to the elite of the European game. And at Barcelona in the 21st century, that doesn't just mean being at the party. It means being, at the top of the table. It means, winning 2 Champions Leagues in 3 years. That's the standard that they've set. That's the standard that their self-perception is that, and that's been embellished by the explosion in supporters all over the world. I mean, we're talking about the 21st century, the club of the 21st century. It's Barcelona, based on the growth in the developing world and in every far corner of the world. Even though they've not won as many Champions League titles as Real Madrid, they've not been consistent domestically as Manchester United or laterally Manchester City. But if you talk about a club that captures the world's imagination, it's Barcelona. For that reason, they're being forced to take these drastic measures because Joan Laporta wants to deliver on his promise, basically. And that's why he's doing what he's doing right now.
Alan, would I be wrong in saying that all the incredible work that we know Barcelona about as an institution, a football institution, developing players from La Masia and so on, all that incredible work that took them to the heights that you're talking about winning La Liga season after season with players of their own and developing the likes of even Lionel Messi. But this mess that they find themselves in, am I right in saying that they went completely against the grain of what made them so special by maybe not forgetting La Masia, but by signing players that had hit their 30s and players that didn't fit into that Barcelona model that we all recognise?
I think that's a logical assessment for sure. But I think if you look at Barcelona, say from 2003 onwards, when Joan Laporta was elected the first time, the biggest thing he did initially was signing Ronaldinho, and he got elected on the promise of signing David Beckham. Obviously, Beckham went to Madrid in the end from Manchester United. They signed Ronaldinho instead. Ronaldinho won 2 Ballon d'Ors, 04, 05, 05, 06. They won 2 league titles in those years. They won the Champions League in 2006 as well, for the first time since 1982. So that kind of set Barcelona up for a lot of fans. Like for me, I was only 10 years old when that was happening. I was like, oh, this team's incredible for me. So I think it kind of captured the imagination of a lot of fans. And then the second element, of course, was when Pep Guardiola took over in 2008, sorry, 2 years after the Champions League win, and brought in, obviously, brought Gerard Piqué back from United. We developed the way that Xavi was approaching the game, and Iniesta as well. Changed Messi's diet and everything like that to make him the world-class player he became, as opposed to kind of an inconsistent winger. And just brought through other players. I mean, obviously Victor Valdez played an important role. It's like Dani Alves from Sevilla. It was a smart move. Just the classic team in many ways is built up that image. But the problem is that they won so much during those years, between 2008 and 2012, the Guardiola era. They won 2 Champions League titles. They won league titles. They won cups. They won everything. They won 2 trebles. So basically, those players were constantly renegotiating their contracts with the club because they held such power, and Barcelona were making so much money. They gave them these huge contracts. So if you look at like Sergio Roberto, Jordi Alba, Lionel Messi, Busquets, Iniesta, Xavi, Piqué, all these players were on gargantuan contracts. So it made Barcelona's wage bill the biggest in the world. And then when Guardiola left, the way they tried to, kind of reorganize themselves was by, hiring the likes of Tata Martino, and then also, Luis Enrique, and they won the Champions League again. But this time they won the Champions League based off MSN, the trident of Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, and Neymar. And like obviously Messi is homegrown, but Luis Suarez and Neymar were bought for millions and millions of euros. And then after that, because they had lost their essence, you said, it came worse and worse. And it wasn't Neymar and Suarez they were signing. It was Andre Gomez and Yerry Mina and Ousmane Dembele and Felipe Coutinho, like players of questionable mentality, questionable quality, on Neymar and Xavi wages, you could say. But was the solution to focus more on La Masia? I don't think so personally, because the La Masia generation that won everything just to win is a freak generation. And a lot of Barcelona fans to this day look at players in Barca B, like Mikel Marso, for instance, or Arne Comas, and they're kind of saying, okay, these guys they should be in the first team. They're good enough to be in the first team. Because there's an expectation among elements of the Barcelona fan base that if they're at Barca B, if they're a La Masia product, they're going to be a world beater. Whereas in reality, the majority of La Masia products are serviceable professionals, like any academy in the world. It's got a good reputation, but I think it's an oversized reputation based on that freak generation, because it was a freak generation. I was talking about a Ballon d'Or ceremony where the top three people, golds, silver, and bronze, were Barcelona, La Masia products.
In many ways,
So
the class of '92.
Yeah,
the class of '92 is similar in the sense that you can't expect to do that every 10 years. You can't keep producing that at that level.
Yeah, exactly, and it's harmful because United are similar to Barcelona in many ways. In my opinion, I think that both clubs have a powerful mystique and an allure and a very proud history, and they can almost be tripped up by that history in many ways because they make moves based on their history as opposed to based on their present. So if you look at United's last 10 years, like I don't tell you guys, but like I compare it to the way Man City and Liverpool operated, it's completely different. And Liverpool were a club who did do that as well in the past, but they changed their ways when the new ownership came in and Klopp came in. So I think it's an interesting question. I think history can sometimes be a weight around the neck as much as a positive thing, and everything is the same. So.
I think a point you touch upon about how there's elected politicians and elected officials that come into the club, that's, I think, a part of a sort of a trifecta with Barcelona from how I view it from the outside, because you have these officials coming in based on promises and their political ideals, and Barcelona are a sort of unique enigma in the Spanish league in terms of how I look at it, because their direct rival is the most successful football team in the history of football. You have those fans and the continuous debates and arguments that go on between those fans. Barca had obviously a club founded in 1899, 126 years ago or something. In the 90s, where they hit 5-6 domestic titles in that 10-year period, and they managed to get a Champions League, their first Champions League. Like you said, with that sort of freak sort of crap La Masa, you're talking about the greatest player of all time, in my opinion, and I know there's a lot of United fans slate me for that, but Messi is the best footballer who's ever played, and I'll always I'll say and the way I see it, I mean, you have to appreciate football, don't you? And no one has done it finer than Messi. So like he's in that situation where they've come through that crop. And I think ultimately what I have seen with Barca, and correct me if I'm wrong here now, you have that situation in the 90s where they had that glorious team and they won the 6 domestic titles. Then they had the freak like we had in 92, where, as you said, gold, silver and bronze were all youth products. Now, they've come to a situation where that's run out. The well has run dry. And ultimately, they're still playing catch up to Real Madrid. Real Madrid have just gone through a situation where they're supposed to be in a transition year, and they've still managed to win the league and the Champions League. And Barca are playing catch up and playing second fiddle once more. And despite this insurmountable amount of debt, they've gone into this exponential sort of income to be able to try to keep up with them once more. And ultimately, I feel like it's almost like third time lucky that they're going to try this. And they might very well succeed with the integration of players they've purchased, as well as the youth players that are coming through the academy now again.
Yeah, perhaps. I think their whole ambition really this summer with their business has been to build a team that's able to compete with Madrid now. And the funny thing is, they actually aren't that far away from Madrid. Like, don't forget this, they beat Madrid 4-0 at the Bernabeu in March. Won the Champions League and won La Liga. And obviously, we talk about crisis when Barcelona is accurate, but like, Barcelona's crisis isn't exactly the same as, like, with respect, even United's crisis. I mean, they did finish 7th. Yeah, like, they still finished 2nd. You know what I mean? Like, and they've gone out and bought, the most lethal striker in European football. A very, very good winger in Hafinha, a very good centre back, Andreas Christensen, very good midfielder, and Frank Kessie, who's just coming from Scudetto winning Milan team. He's underrated, I think, as well. And they're not done yet. You know what I mean? I just talked tonight, even that after activating the second ever, they're going to go and push for Jules Koundé. So they're improving the team significantly. for next season. So I think that I was talking to some other journalists the other day over a few beers, and we were kind of saying, who's your pick for La Liga? And it's Barca. To be honest, right now it's Barca because Madrid don't tend to retain titles. Their whole thing is the Champions League. And even though Madrid were very successful last season, they didn't dominate games in a positive manner. So while the results were good, the comebacks were dramatic and exciting. They weren't dominating games like a properly elite team does. And they were coming up against opposition that were either undercooked or distracted in case Liverpool did. Whereas you look at that Barca team from 2009 to 2011, if they came up against, you guys know very well, one of the best United teams of all time. They beat them twice. So it was very impressive what they did in that year because they dominated the games all the time, basically. But so I think what their whole ambition basically is to kind of build a team capable of possibly winning the Champions League next season and winning La Liga, and then using the momentum generated from that to get back to where they belong. Because I think the pandemic and the drastic mismanagement of the Bartomeu regime is the primary reason for this. And I think that Laporte, this whole thing is taking risks now, working in the future now, based on a short-term payoff that will be like a rocket to get them back on track.
Oh, for sure, and I agree with that. But then at the same time, you have to look what Madrid are doing as well. And they're a side that have just had success. And while not disregarding the historical factor of an inability to be able to string together sort of multiple domestic titles over the past 20 years, how they're building their squad now is very, very intelligent. And the likes of Camavinga, Tchouaméni, these young, strong, athletic midfielders who have the capability to come in and dominate games, and not only dominate them for a couple of weeks, dominate them for a decade. So they're very, very intelligently looking at the likes of Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, and they're saying, how are we going to replace these guys? And they've already done it. They have replaced them, and they're guys that can come in and dominate this side for a decade.
Yeah, and also I think the plan, because Kroos and Modric both expire their contracts at the end of next season. I think Kroos has turned down an extension offer. He wants to see how important he is coming into the season. But their plan is to go for Jude Bellingham. So that's their number one target. They're going to be Liverpool primarily for him and probably other clubs as well. But we've already seen them go and get too many, ahead of Liverpool. That was a direct battle, and it's not money either. It's prestige of playing for Real Madrid. So they're definitely, they've done very well as well. I think both of these teams, as opposed to the clubs, are in a good position going into the new season, especially if Barca pull off the defensive acquisition that they need to make.
Alan, just to go through the status of Barcelona this summer and with transfers, because at the very beginning we knew about Kessie, we knew about 2 or 3 deals that were in the pipeline. Those deals, there was problems with those players being registered. And then all of a sudden Barcelona can go out and sign Lewandowski for X amount, Rafinha for X amount. Now there's talk of a second lever being activated. Can you just talk us through some of that? Because to me, I know I've just rambled through it, and to the listener, this just sounds like a complete circus, I'd imagine.
But it's definitely intense and crazy, and it's been interesting covering it every day because especially before they signed Lewandowski and Rafinha, there was just chaos going on. So many names being thrown up. One thing I say with the registering thing, that isn't actually a financial issue. That's a salary space issue. So it's the way La Liga mandate that wages are allocated, and it's based off of what your income is and that kind of thing. So it's kind of not that they can't afford to register them, it's that they can't find the space to register them. That's the primary driving force behind the Frenkie de Jong thing. Because Frenkie is a clause in his contract when he gets into the fourth season, his contract increases quite significantly for the final 2 years of his deal. So it goes up basically. I spent 3 years of his deal. It goes up a lot. So his wage bill is going to be huge next season. If Barcelona to get rid of them this summer for the same fee they purchased them for, 85 million euros, give or take, they would amortize by writing off the final 3 years of his deal 30 million euros in the wage bill. You know what I mean? So it's very significant in that sense there. And that would give them the space to register the other players. But then that's also helped by the activation of the levers. They're hoping to, not do that maybe as much as they could. They've done 2. The third one is still on the table. The first one is basically 10% of the TV rights over the next 25 years for La Liga, not Champions League. Second one, which was done today, was 15. So now they've got 25% of the TV rights for the next 20 years is all sold, basically. And like today, they just brought in 400 million euros for doing that. The second one. It was 300 or something for the first one. And then if they need to, they could pull the third one, which will be the sale of, BLM, Barcelona licensing and merchandising, which is going to be a big one. They sell 49% of it, basically. They're bringing a lot of money for that too. So, yeah, I think the timing of today's one seems to be related to Koundé, because Koundé was supposed to not be traveling with the squad today, the Sevilla squad to Portugal for their mini camp, and he's travelled. So apparently Chelsea are kind of going, why have you travelled when a deal is imminent? And the reports in Catalonia, and this is being disputed by people I know in Andalusia, is that he wants to wait for Barcelona. So I don't know what will happen, but yeah, that's the case anyway. It seems to be quite it is like properly like gunslinger stuff, like no doubt about it. I'm not a financial expert, like, but kind of it's entertaining for me, but like, I mean, I guess Barcelona fans, like, clear thinking Barcelona fans are worried for the future stuff because they don't know if they can afford to do these things. But you know what I'm saying? It's kind of a complicated dynamic.
So just quickly, so I can just understand this, Barcelona are selling lots and lots of future assets, okay, in big bundles for short-term signings.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're also, as well, not just that, I forgot to mention, they're also basically trimming the fat of the squad as much as they can. So, like, Ferran Jokla gone to Club Brugge. They waived the transfer fee. He's just gone to get rid of the salary, basically. Langley gone to Spurs. What else is there? They basically told Ricky Puig, Martin Braithwaite, Ricky Puig, Martin Braithwaite, Nestor Morera.
Alan, is this being criticised in Spain? Is this being criticised by Spanish media? Because I understand maybe there might be a belief that Barcelona are in such a bad position right now that they need to do something drastic. You mentioned to cope with these state-owned clubs, and when people ask how do we cope with state-owned clubs, it being the Premier League is very, very different than La Liga, obviously, and La Liga has a lot of catching up to do. But surely, when I break it down to the amount of future assets that are being sold out for short-term signings, that must be criticised by sections of the media.
There's the media in Spain. There's no media in Spain. There's two medias: the Barcelona media and the Madrid media. So the Madrid media criticize everything, and the Barcelona media are getting excited and talking about, making up puns for Lewandowski, that kind of stuff. That's just the way it is. But I wouldn't say they're doing it for short-term signings. I think they're doing it for short-term success. I think their thinking is that if they can get them back in a position where they believe they should be after the pandemic being in the back window, then they'll be able to, get the revenues back to where they were, which was the biggest of any club in the world. Pre-pandemic, they were making more money than any other sporting entity in the world. You know what I mean? So that's what they're doing. Is they're basically taking that risk. The alternative would be to go pure La Masia focused, accept being an all-star run for the next 5 years, cede the title to Real Madrid, compete with Atletico and Sevilla and Real Betis and Valencia for those European places. But the reality is the value they lose financially by doing that is so damaging, especially in an era when the Premier League is pulling away more than ever. This is the summer where Aston Villa signed Diego Carlos from Sevilla. Sevilla played in the Champions League 3 years running. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what we're dealing with here. Like, that's the financial realities of La Liga. So Barcelona's whole thing is that they want European Super League to happen. They don't want to be trailing in Tottenham Hotspur's wake when it does, or if it does. So that's why they're taking these risks, because they think that the value they'll make by having Barcelona be competitive next season and the season after is worth the risk.
Lee Mitten alluded to in a report for GQ. I thought it was interesting because he said that Manchester United have no plan B for Frenkie de Jong, because he made the point that Barcelona had no plan B when they went for Frenkie de Jong, because there's no midfielder out there quite like him. So they wanted a specific type of midfielder. Why hasn't it gone to plan? Like it should have.
Should have, yeah. And I saw Ten Hag's comments after the Palace game. He was talking about midfield targets, and he kind of said we have a man in mind for that kind of number 6 position. But if we miss out on them, we're not going to go and replace them with some, plan B because we've other players who can play there. And I think with Barcelona, the issue is that he's Sergio Busquets playing in that position. And he's just not good enough to take over Sergio Busquets, even when Sergio was 32 years of age. He hasn't responded to the duty of having that sitting pivot role at the base of Barcelona's midfield. He's been playing as kind of an interior, as a box-to-box player. He probably had his best spell with Barcelona, Copa del Rey, in the 2020-21 season under Ronald Koeman. And he scored a lot of really important goals in the second half of the season. And actually just as important in that Copa del Rey victory as Lionel Messi was, where he had a good period under Koeman, because Koeman knew how to get the best out of it and give him a free role, that kind of thing, working to his strengths. But since then, and with the emergence of Gavi, Pedri, and Pablo Torre in pre-season, and Kessie coming in as well, rumors of Bernardo Silva, there's just not a place for him in the midfield. He has not nailed down a role in 3 years. He's been playing different positions. He's been attacking midfielder, box-to-box midfielder, interior, kind of a Carrillo, as they say, kind of a shuttling midfielder, a sitting midfielder. But he's never made any role his own, like Pedri has or like Busquets has. That's basically it. Even though he's learned, fluent Spanish, he's completely settled in the city, you can't fault his personal application. He's not well. And also, sorry going on now, but just it also wasn't helped the era he came in. Because he came in as a big Bartomeu era signing. He's a flagship Bartomeu era signing, like Antoine Griezmann was. He's associated with that regime, and also he's been playing at a really dysfunctional Barcelona. So that's kind of it as well.
The way you answered the first question about Frenkie's stance, that he wants to stay, and then you spoke about more so Barcelona's stance. Can that become a problem as this saga drags on? Could that become more of a wake-up call to the young? Because as of now, there's only one route out of Barcelona. And you're after mentioning 5 or 6 midfielders. You can only play so many midfielders. Is there almost a bit of a feeling that de Jong won't have a place at Barcelona next season? So why would he stay?
Well, see, this is where it gets a bit complicated, because basically, apparently Xavi has told him that he wants him to stay. He thinks he's a fundamental player for him. And it's financial realities that's forcing him out of the club, not sporting realities. And I believe that, Xavi has that conversation over the summer saying, I value you as a player, but it's the club's prerogative to sell you because of the financial realities. Xavi doesn't care about wages. Xavi cares about a player. And the truth is that there is a separation at Barcelona between the club and the team. In terms of Xavi has a good relationship with all the players, with Ousmane Dembele, for instance, all these kind of players, kind of fringe players, being at odds with the club. And Laporta is taking a different position because he has to. The reality is that Xavi and Laporta are working in tandem, but maybe it's more good cop, bad cop than people think it is. Maybe Xavi isn't being as genuine as he's purporting to be with De Jong, for instance. Maybe he is working in tandem with Laporta in that sense. That's, I think, why, because Xavi has told him that. But then, at the same time, I think if you're looking at it logically, the wages he's earning, the money he's cost, the wage base free up by leaving, the money he'd bring in, I think it makes more sense for Barca to sell him than keep him. That's the options they have in the field. When he played against Inter Miami in a friendly in Miami 2 days ago, he plays as centre back. Maybe that was a message. He's played centre back before for Barca, but I don't know. I think that his days are numbered, and I think that he'll eventually accept he needs to leave. But whether it's to United or to Chelsea.
This has happened with a lot of players at Barcelona in the past, and it can get quite political, and you see then as a result fans turning on these players. Has that been the case with Frenkie de Jong? Like, how do the fans feel about this? Because it's a player that the club are trying to push out. You mentioned Xavi wants to keep. So then as a result, I'd imagine that the fans are quite split.
I think the fans like him generally. I think he's well liked. Like I said, he learned Spanish. He's pretty good posting interviews in Castellano and Spanish. He loves the city. He loves the club, and he's Dutch. He's a midfielder. He's elegant. Like he's in many ways the archetypical foreigner who comes and lives in Barcelona and settles perfectly with the club. The fans like him, and also, unlike a lot of other players, there's no questions of poor professionalism or being absolutely useless. Like I mean, it's a Coutinho staying and being just absolutely terrible, and then scoring against Man United in Nou Camp in the Champions League and putting his fingers in his ears, this kind of thing. Ousmane Dembele and his questions of professionalism. It does none of that really at all with Frenkie. He's pretty what's the word? He's kind of the model professional in many ways, and I think he's liked by the supporters. So there's no supporters turning against him.
And finally, how can Barcelona expect De Jong to walk away when they owe him 17 million euros and not pay him? I know it's not due as of now and it's due at the end of his contract, but if it's something that he deferred, you'd think out of a kind of a gentleman's agreement that would be paid in good gesture. It just, the reason why I'm asking that question is I think a lot of people that are reading this from our angle feel Barcelona are being very, very shifty, if I can say that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, and it is obviously the man deserves his money, but I guess Barcelona are gonna. It's not a. It's an either-or situation. It's either you leave the club now, get your move, or you don't and you stay and you're not going to really play. You're not going to be important. I mean, like, is 17 million euros that much to Frenkie that he's going to stay at a club where he knows he's not wanted? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like, and is it shifty? Yeah, I mean, of course it's shifty. Barcelona are, like I said, they're shooting from the hip right now. They're taking these risks. They're making these calls that are not ideal and questionable. But players in the past have done the same to their club. It's like I always say, football. There's no such thing as loyalty. It doesn't exist. Like, in my opinion, footballers and football clubs are basically two trains going the same track, and when their circumstances are mutually beneficial, they stay together. But when it's not, they're going to go apart. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's not a case of a club being disloyal to a player or a player being disloyal to a club. It's just a case of natural circumstances no longer aligning. And while it's unfortunate and unique in the way that they've deferred the wages and kind of held that back, that's an additional problem. I just can't see him getting the money and leaving. I think he's going to have to stay to get the money. I just don't see him staying given the circumstances. I'd be surprised if he does.
I know that footballers and football clubs are on a different planet to us. We're merely peasants just watching on from far, far away. But there's a situation that's been very, very similar to this with their rivals in recent years, and Mr. Gareth Bale, when he was very clearly told that you're deemed surplus to requirements. And he said, well, I have a contract. I don't necessarily need to go anywhere. I can play golf and I can still get paid. And I suppose the biggest thing with it, it's the whole moral side of it. And it's really showing that, I mean, surely if it's a situation, I don't know the full contractual ends of this, but if Barca have gone to Frenkie like 2 years ago and said, is there any chance you can defer X amount of your wages and we'll give them back to you at the end? Surely a solicitor looked over it. Surely there was some sort of a contractual agreement that would state if we sell you, if your contract is null and void, that you're still due the money that you're owed. But it would seem as though that's not the case by the way this is being approached.
But it can't be, because if it was, then it'd be legally enforced. Like, it seems to be a gentleman's agreement type thing, which I think in businesses are a dangerous thing to enter in the first place. Because I think
it's incredibly naive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, but at the same time, I understand why he did that, because it's kind of like it is bad. Like it's basically Barcelona came to all the players and kind of said, okay, guys, we hit by the pandemic. We need to try and register new players. We need to try and get rid of Lionel Messi. Take pay cuts to make the club stay alive. Like, so they were kind of saying, okay, Frenkie was probably thinking, I'm going to be here for the next 10 years. I'll do it. I'm still making a lot of money. And now the way it's worked out is he's surplus to requirements. So it must not be contractually obligated or contractually, what's the word? Kind of, you know what I'm saying? It must be a genuine.
Which is in this particular situation for that amount of money. I get what you're saying, that in the grand scheme of things, that amount of money is pocket change to a footballer. But it still seems crazy that it was a gentleman's agreement and a handshake that instilled this particular arrangement. It's madness. It really typifies the entire situation that Barcelona are in at this moment.
Must have been arranged in an Amsterdam cafe or something.
I guess what I'm going to do is maybe like they said, if you fulfill the contract, you get the wages back. If you don't, you don't. You know what I'm saying? But that could have been the way to do it. But regarding the Gareth Bale comparison, I wouldn't say in a million years Frenkie would do with Gareth Bale. But like, listen, Gareth Bale is a popular guy, but I think the way he managed his career at Real Madrid is a disgrace, frankly. I think the way
bit of an enigma, right, wasn't it?
The wage he took for those many years was contributing nothing to the team. Let's just say, I don't think it was a coincidence that when he left Real Madrid, very few players posted goodbye messages of the day, not one. You know what I'm saying? I think
he started speaking Spanish when he went to MLS.
Yeah, to Los Angeles FC. Yeah. But I think Frenkie's a different character. Frenkie's competitive. Frenkie cares about his career. He cares about his career path. I really like Frenkie as a person as well as a player. So I don't.
But he's also in his prime, isn't he? He's also in his prime right now.
5 years old, man. 25 years old.
Yeah.
And he just got engaged to his missus, like, so he's probably like, you know.
I'd imagine with those engagement rings, you can't wait to take walks down Salford Quays. Alan, thanks so much for joining us on this podcast, because you've been on before and it's great to catch up with you in all matters La Liga. Like I said, you're renowned now. You're appearing on CNN and we'll have to get your autograph and so on, verified and so on. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to the